At the beginning of 1944, I broke my foot, and then my heart nearly stopped. They were giving me oxygen and camphor injections, and I hung on the very edge of death. My nurse told me afterward that I seemed surrounded by a bright glow, something, she said, she'd sometimes seen in the dying. And I found myself high in space. Far below me hung the earth bathed in a glorious blue light, the deep blue sea, the continents, Ceylon beneath my feet, India ahead, the reddish desert of Arabia off to the left. I worked out later you'd have to be 1,000 miles up to see what I saw. It was the most glorious thing I had ever looked at, and I knew I was about to leave the earth, and I have to be honest with you, I did not want to come back. I want to talk about death tonight, not to sell you a heaven, to tell you what a psychologist actually thinks it means that we cannot stop asking. Let me be scrupulously careful, because this is the subject where people most want me to say more than I can honestly say. I never claimed to know what happens after death. I said, near the end of my life, that on this question I can do no more than tell stories, that I can only mythologize, and I want to be exact about why that isn't a cop-out. It is not that I wished for a life after death. In fact, I'd have preferred not to lean on such ideas at all. It's that, without my wishing it, and without my doing anything to summon them, thoughts of this nature moved about in me insistently, and my whole discipline as a psychologist was this: I do not get to suppress a real psychic fact just because I can't prove it, and I do not get to inflate it into a certainty just because I feel it. Prejudice, in either direction, cripples the full phenomenon of psychic life. So here is the actual claim, and it's smaller and stranger than either the believer or the skeptic wants. The fact that requires explaining is not heaven. It's that the human psyche produces these images and these questions universally, unbidden, and has done so in every culture for as long as there have been humans. That is a real datum, and I take it seriously as a datum, whatever it does or doesn't prove about the beyond. Now, let me tell you the part of the vision that actually changed how I understood a life, because it wasn't the view of the earth. As I floated there, I saw a great dark block of stone in space, the size of my house, hollowed into a temple, with a Hindu sitting silently at its entrance who I knew was waiting for me, and a doorway ringed with small burning oil lamps. And as I approached it, something extraordinary happened. Everything began to be stripped away from me. Everything I had aimed at, wished for, thought, the entire phantasmagoria of earthly existence fell off, and it was an extremely painful process. But when it was gone, something remained. I found I was carrying with me everything I had ever experienced and done. Not my possessions, not my ambitions, not my reputation, my history, what had actually happened, and what I had actually made of it. I might put it this way: it was with me, and I was it. I consisted of my own history. I felt, with total certainty, this is what I am. I am this bundle of what has been and what has been accomplished. Sit with that, because it is the whole teaching. At the edge of everything, what a person turns out to be is not their striving, not their mask, not any of the things they spent their life defending. What's left, when all of that is stripped off, is the sum of what you actually lived. Your real experiences, your real choices, the things you genuinely did and became. That, and only that, is what you carry. You might reasonably say, fine, that was your delirium, your oxygen-starved brain. Why should it mean anything for me? Here is why I think it does, and it connects to everything on this channel. Rationalism has quietly deleted the question of death from serious conversation, and it managed that only because most modern people now identify themselves almost entirely with their consciousness. They imagine they are nothing more than what they know about themselves. But I've spent this whole series showing you how tiny that lit fragment is, how much larger the psyche is than the ego that thinks it's the whole show. Our very concepts of space and time, I'd remind you, have only approximate validity. We are far less sure of the boundaries of the psyche than our confidence suggests. And there's a practical consequence I watched play out clinically for decades. A person who has amputated the question of death, who treats their own ending as merely an embarrassing biological full stop to be ignored, tends to live the second half of life badly, exactly exactly as I described in the video on Life's Afternoon. The psyche, it seems, does not want death treated as nothing. It wants death held as a genuine horizon, a real goal, the way the setting is the sun's goal, because that horizon is what gives the second half of life its forward direction and its weight. To refuse the question entirely is not brave rationalism. It's a kind of impoverishment, and the soul registers it as one. So what do you actually do with your own mortality, without either denying it or pretending to certainties you don't have? First, keep the question open rather than answered. Don't force yourself into either a creed you don't believe or a flat materialism that pretends the deepest human question is settled and boring. I lent an attentive ear, as I put it, to the strange myths of the psyche, and took a careful look at whatever came my way, regardless of whether it fit my theories. That posture, curious, undefended, neither credulous nor dismissive, is available to you, and it's healthier than either false certainty. Second, live as though what you carry out is your history. If the one thing that survives the stripping away is the sum of what you actually experienced and did, then the practical instruction writes itself. Live things fully rather than defending yourself against them. The unlived life, the experiences avoided, the choices dodged, the feelings managed instead of felt, those are exactly what you won't have in the bundle. This is the same lesson as the second half of life video, now seen from the far end, Drain the Cup. Third, use death to affirm your life rather than escape it. What I understood after that illness was how important it is to say yes to your own destiny, to forge the kind of self that doesn't shatter when incomprehensible things happen, that can endure the truth. Held rightly, the fact of death does not make life meaningless. It makes it matter. A thing that lasted forever could be squandered forever. A life that ends is a life whose every day has actual weight. I came back, obviously. I was bitterly disappointed too. At first, the earthly world felt like a prison after what I'd seen. But I lived nearly 20 more years, and I did some of my most important work in them. And I think that's the point. The vision didn't teach me to long for the beyond. It taught me what a life actually amounts to when everything else is stripped away. What you truly lived and nothing else. I can't tell you what waits past the door ringed with lamps. I can tell you that the question is not a childish one to be outgrown, and that how you hold it shapes how you live. That was always the only part I was qualified to speak to. If you like this video, share, like, and subscribe. If you are interested in learning more about Carl Jung's teachings and take the evaluation that will help you understand more about yourself, go to selfindividuation.com.